Hello and welcome back. So till now we have learned about NoSQL databases, we have seen basics of MongoDB, and we have also seen how we can connect to MongoDB using Java. So using Java we have connected to the MongoDB server, and then we have created a database, we have created a collection, and we have inserted a document also. So we have seen how can we connect to MongoDB using Mongo Shell and Java. So now in this section we are going to create and develop a project using MongoDB as a backend and Java JSP as a programming. Okay, so with JSP we'll develop the front end and Java will use for the backend programming, and we'll also use JSTL, JSP tag libraries, and a little bit of servlet. So you need to know the basics of JSP, tag libraries, servlet, and Java. So if you are familiar with these things, it will be easy for you to follow, and if you are not familiar, not to worry, you can revise, and I'll also explain the things, and if possible I'll try to add the basics of JSP and JSTL to this course. So as soon as possible I'll try to add the basics of JSP and JSTL. So we are going to develop this project user management systems using MongoDB Java JSP. So here we can add user, suppose Ramesh, and email ID. You can keep on adding more fields. I'm simply using 3 fields: name, email ID, and password. If you want to increase the forms text field or any other field, you can keep on adding. I'll tell you how to do that as well. And we can add some password here, and when click on add, see here it will show you all the other user along with the user we have inserted. So see here Ramesh and Ramesh. Okay, so in this way here, from here we can edit as well. So see here Ramesh, and here you can put Ramesh T and edit user, it will be updated. See here, now it is Ramesh T, and we can delete also. Click delete and it will be deleted. So this is the simple application we are going to develop with the MongoDB and Java JSP, JSTL, all other things. Okay, so see you in the next lecture where we'll start developing this from scratch. So we are going to write all these Java files for like adding user, delete user, edit user logic, the user converter for converting the DB object to the Java object and Java object to the DB object, then Mongo listener for connecting to the MongoDB, and then the DO class, and then the Pojo class for user, and all these things. So let's see, then we'll write the JSP files as well, and then we'll see how we can format the page using CSS. All those things we are going to see from the next lecture onwards. So I'll start from very basics and from scratch, so not to worry, just follow along and you'll be mastering the MongoDB and Java. Okay, so see you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back. This is Sunil, and let's get started with the project right away. So to start with the project creation, we need to create a project. So in this I'm going to create a dynamic web project. Okay, so let's click on the dynamic web project. So to come here you need to go to file, new, and then dynamic web project, and then here we need to give a name for the project. So let me give it a name, MongoDB Java project. Okay, and then click on next, and click on finish. No need to do anything else. Okay, click on generate web.xml deployment descriptor because we need the web.xml. Okay, so and then click on finish. So this will create a click no for now. This will create our project, dynamic web project, which will have this folder structure, source folder. Here we'll create all the packages and Java classes. Then we have the JRE systems library. It will have all the Java related jar files. And then we have the server, Pivotal TC server, that we are going to use in this course. And then we have the web content, which will have meta INF and web INF. Web INF will have web.xml file, and then here we'll also add the JSP files. Okay, so JSP, CSS, all those files will be in the web content folder. Okay, so now we have, let me close the earlier project. So right click, close all files, and this is the project, which Java project that we did in the previous section. So let me close this. We no need of this project now. So now we have this project, but in this course I'm going to use Maven for building the project. So to build we need more Maven, so I need to convert this dynamic web project to Maven project. Okay, so go to the right click on the project and go to the configure, and here you can see convert to JPA, convert to plugin, convert to Maven, and convert to aspect-J. So I want to convert to the Maven project, so I'll click on that option, and here no need to do anything. Okay, click on finish. So this will convert our project to the Maven project. So what it will do, it will just add a pom.xml file here. Okay, so see here there is a pom.xml file that we need to modify to add the dependencies, to add the jar files. So instead of adding manually, we need to add the jar files through Maven. That's why I have converted this dynamic web project to Maven project. So see you in the next lecture where we'll be configuring our project. Hello and welcome back. This is Sunil again, and in this lecture we are going to discuss about web.xml. Web.xml is a deployment descriptor for our web project or web application. So everything about your application will be stored in the web.xml. So let me tell you little bit about web.xml. Web.xml you can find in a dynamic web project inside the web content and then web INF folder. So inside the web content, then web INF, you can find the web.xml file, which is a XML file, and it is known as web application deployment descriptor for your application. And we can define everything about our application that server needs to know when it is loading our application. Okay, so this is all about the application deployment descriptor, that is web.xml. So let me tell you one more thing. We can define few things like servlet and other components like filters, listeners, initialization, parameters, container managed security constraints, resources, and welcome pages in the web.xml. So you can see here there is already a display name for our project. There is a web app and then display name, and then the welcome file list is there. So it is already given the default index.html, htm, JSP. Okay, so these are the, if you want to define your own page, you can define it here. Okay, so we can define the welcome pages, resources, constraint, all those things inside the web.xml. So we are going to use web.xml to define two things. We are going to write the web.xml for welcome file. Okay, so for this I'll be using a JSP file and we can name it like index.jsp, or here I'm going to give users.jsp. okay, so you can select a name for your welcome page. So I'm going to use users.jsp. so I'm going to use this welcome file list. So when my web page will be loaded or application will be loaded on the server, it will display me this users.jsp page. So we will write the JSP page in the coming lectures, but now I'm only describing it here. okay, so next thing I'm going to use is I'm going to use one more feature of web.xml, that is context param. So there are two things, there is a init param and there is a context param. These are the two static parameters which we can store in web.xml. so what is init param? Init-param we use to define the static parameter that is not going to change frequently, but if we use init-param to define a parameter which is not going to change, it is going to constrain till the servlet scope. So if we are defining it a parameter inside this init param, it will be applicable only for a particular servlet scope. It will not be applicable for whole application. And for this reason, in this project I'm going to use context param. So what is context param? So context param is same static parameter that is not going to change in whole application, but context param will be applicable for whole application. So it is not going to restrict to a one servlet scope, it will be common for whole application. okay, so we are going to use the context param. We can also use the set attribute, but we are going to use the context param here. okay, so we are going to use context param. So let me define this. So we will be using two parameters here. So one I'm going to use is context, inside that we need to give the parameter name as param-name, and here the parameter name will be mongo underscore host. So we are going to define a static parameter, that is mongo host, because we know we are going to use MongoDB and the server runs on the local host, so that is not going to change. So we'll be using this param value to define the local host. Use param name. okay, so local host. So now we have defined one parameter, one static parameter that is going to be common throughout the application. The next thing is we need to define one more thing, and that will be Mongo port. So next thing is we will be using Mongo port. okay, and here the port will be 27017 as usual, because we are going to use MongoDB. So these are the three things we need to define in the web.xml, that is deployment descriptor. The Mongo host, that is not going to change, that is local host. So name is Mongo host, value is local host. Name is Mongo port, value is 27017. So instead of writing this local host and 27017 all the time, we are going to fetch these values from the web.xml when our application loads, and we are going to display users.jsp. So we are going to define this user.jsp in the coming lectures, but for now this is all about the configuration in the web.xml. See you in the next lecture where we are going to configure pom.xml. So we are going to write something in the pom.xml for JSTL and Maven. So see you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back. So in the previous lecture we have learned and we have written our web.xml file. In this lecture we are going to learn about Maven So in this project I'm going to use Apache Maven for building our project. So let me introduce you with the Apache Maven. I'll give you short intro so that you will be aware of what is Apache Maven and how we are going to get benefited with this. So we are going to modify this file. This file you can find in the base directory of the project, that is pom.xml. This pom.xml is the center point of the Apache Maven. So everything we want to do with Apache Maven, we have to write inside this pom.xml file. So what is Apache Maven? Apache Maven is a software project management and comprehension tool. So based on the concept, it is actually based on the concept of project object model, that is POM, and that's why its name is pom.xml. Okay, so it is based on the concept of project object model, and Maven can manage a project's build, reporting, documentation, distribution, mailing list, configuration management, dependency, all these things along with build from a center point of information, that is pom.xml file. Okay, so Maven provides various ways for developer to manage a project, and they can manage the builds, reporting, documentation, dependencies, configuration management, releases, distribution and mailing list with Maven with very simple steps and with utmost ease. So what Maven does, it just simplifies and standardizes the project build process. So instead of doing the manual process for team collaboration and building and collaborating with the different teams and different developers, we can use Apache Maven to automate the process. Okay, so project object model, that is POM, is an XML file that we can find in the base directory of a application, okay, or a project. So pom.xml contains all the information about your project, like project, and here you can see this is model number for Apache Maven, and then here you can find the group ID. Group ID is actually the, like, you can give it in a different way. We can give like a com dot your, like, suppose is your success, okay, dot MongoDB. So it will say that this group ID means this project belongs to this company is your success, and it will contain all the projects related to MongoDB. Okay, so this way we can understand what is group ID. Then artifact ID is like a project name, so we can give the project name inside the artifact ID, and then the version is the version number for your project. Okay, and then here packaging you can give like var or jar, whatever you want, and then here the source directory is src, which is here. So we'll start writing the Java files inside that. And then comes the plugins. Plugins are like what are the plugins you are going to use for your project, that we are going to define inside the plugins. So inside plugins we can define the plugins inside the plugin. Okay, and here artifact ID, version, source, target, all those things we can define. Okay, and then here we have another configuration for web directory, so web content. Okay, so we are going to write this file for our project. So let's get started. So very first thing, we need to add the MongoDB dependency. We have already added in the Java section of this course, where we were connecting to the MongoDB using Java, so we know how to do that. So let me do it one more time. So what we'll do, we'll add a dependencies, and inside the dependencies we will add all the dependency. So for that we'll add use dependency, and inside the dependency we need to add the group ID. So sorry, first we need to add the group ID and then artifact ID. Okay, so here I'm adding the group ID for MongoDB, that will be org.mongodb, and then artifact ID will be mongo-java-driver. Okay, so this is the artifact ID and this is the group ID, and then the next is version. So we need to define the version. Version is 3.2.2. okay, so now we have defined the dependency for MongoDB. So let me align it. Okay, so next thing is now, okay, it is building the workspace. Okay, so next thing is we need to add the dependency for JSTL as well, because we are going to use the tag libraries as well, so we'll add that as well. So for that we need to use the group ID. For JSTL, group ID will be javax.servlet. okay, so this is the group ID. Artifact ID will be JSTL and version will be 1.2 we are going to use. Okay, so see, so now we have added the dependency for JSTL and MongoDB. Sorry, here I've written something wrongly, it should be Mongo. Okay, so now we are done with the adding dependency for MongoDB and JSTL. Next thing is we need to add a plugin. So we'll go at last and we'll hit enter, and here we need to add the plugin for Maven compiler. Okay, so for that we need to add the artifact ID. First thing we need to specify plugin, and inside plugin we need to give the unit artifact ID, and for this Maven compiler plugin artifact ID will be Maven-compiler-plugin. okay, next thing is we need to give the version. So for this plugin we are going to use version 3.1. it should be version, and then we need to give the configuration. So let's give the configuration. For this configuration we are going to give two things. One will be fork, and that will define as true, and then the next will be executables. Executable will be the, here executable will give for Java compiler, that is JDK bin. Okay, so that it will compile all the Java files. So see, you give the path for your Java compiler, that is JDK. So program files /java /jdk. I'm going to use 1.7.0_45 version /bin/javac.exe. So javac.exe, we all know it's a Java compiler. So we are going to tell Maven that we need to use this Java compiler to execute the Java files. Okay, that's it. We need to define this much only, and okay, let me align it. Okay, now it is looking perfectly fine. So this is the configuration we need to write in the Maven pom.xml file. First one is for MongoDB dependency, and then for servlet dependency, and then we need to define the plugin for Java compiler. Okay, plugin for Java compiler. Okay, and once we have done this, we can build this project. Okay, so right click on the project, go to the run as, and click on Maven build or Maven install. Okay, so it will install all the required dependency and the plugins. So see here, it is starting. See here, it is saying build success. It means our build is successful. We can go ahead and run the program. So see you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back. This is Sunil again, and in this lecture we are going to create the project structure. I'm going to create few folders for our project so that we can keep the respective files in that. Like we want some CSS file, we want some JavaScript file, and we want some images to be used in our project. So for that we are going to create folders. So first thing, we need to create all the front-end related things in the web content, like JSP pages or CSS that has been used in creating a page. We need to keep that in the web content. So web content means we are going to use what are the things we are going to represent on the page that is visible as a web page, or a front end that we are going to use in web content. So I'll click on the right click on the web content and go to new, and I'll create a folder. So go to folder, and here you give the folder name. The first folder name I'll give as CSS. Okay, and then I'll create one more folder. I'll create a JavaScript folder. There we'll keep all the JavaScript files. So JS, and then I'll create one more for keeping all the images like logo and other things. Okay, so I'll create images folder. You can keep img also, not a problem. I'm giving full name images. Click on OK. Okay, so now we have CSS, JavaScript and images folder here, so that we can keep the respective files in that. We need our entry page that we have defined in the web.xml, that is users.jsp. So that will create in the web content. So right click, go to the others, and here just type JSP, and see here you will find two options, JSP and JSP tag. We are going to create a JSP file, so click on JSP file and give it a name. So we want to give the name users.jsp and click on finish. Okay, so see here our basic structure for JSP is created, like doc type, HTML, head, meta tag, title, head, body, and closing body and closing of HTML. So this is the basic structure of a HTML page or JSP page. If you use this scriptlet, it will be a JSP. Okay, and now we have the CSS, images and JavaScript as well. So from the next lecture onward, we are going to create the web page, the front end of our application. So see you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back. So let's start writing the JSP file. So first thing I'll change is title. So here we can give the title of our project, that is user management system. Okay, and then the another thing we need to add, the very first line we need to change it to, not change, we need to add inside the scriptlet. We need to add here we need to tell the JSP that we are going to use tag library. So we use scriptlet @taglib, and then we give the URI for tag library. So in this case we are going to use http:// and here we'll use java.sun.com/JSP/JSTL/core. So this is the URI for tag library, and then we need to specify one more thing, that is prefix. We'll see what is this prefix and how we are going to use this. Okay, for now we'll be using prefix as C. Okay, so this line will enable us to use the tag libraries in our JSP page. So now we have the tag libraries and user title. Next thing is we need to see here doc type is there. Next thing is we need to add the JavaScript file and CSS file. Okay, so for that what I do, I'll go to the web content and CSS, and here I'll create a CSS file that I'm going to use in my project. Okay, so go to other and type CSS, and you can see here CSS file, and give the name for the file. So here I'll give the usual name, that is style.css, and click on finish. So see here, now I have a CSS file, style.css. In the same way I'll create a JavaScript file. Go to other, type JavaScript source file, give it a name like script.js, and click on finish. So now we have the CSS file and JavaScript file here. We'll write the content later. For now what I do, I'll add into the JSP file. So for that, to add a external CSS file, we can use the link. Okay, and for link we can add the relative, and here we can give style sheet because we are going to use the CSS, and here we can give the reference for the file. The reference for the file will be the path for the CSS file. It will be css/style.css, and here we'll close the link. Okay, so now here we are telling our JSP that we are going to use this style.css, which is under the CSS folder, for our purpose, for our styling our web page. Okay, the next thing is we need to attach the JavaScript file. So for JavaScript file we can use the script. Okay, script type text JavaScript, and here we can give the source for the JavaScript file, and it will be js/script.js. Okay, sorry, it should be src. Okay, so now we have the JavaScript file and CSS file. For reference we'll write the script in that. Okay, and from here, from the body tag, we'll start writing the actual web page that we are going to display. Okay, so from the next lecture onward, we'll start writing the navigation part and the CSS part of this project. Okay, see you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back. This is Sunil again, and in this lecture we are going to add a social link on top right corner of our website, our home page of the application, and a navigation to add the link for our home page, about us, all those things. If you want, I'll tell you how to add that, and then we'll add the logo. Okay, so these three things we are going to do. The first thing what I do, we are going to use some images. So I have all those images here. I'll just copy and paste these images on my image folder of the project. So right click on the images and click on paste. So now we have the images here to be used in our project. Okay, so let's start writing the code. So first thing, we need to use the div tag. Okay, and here I'm going to use a class, and since I'm going to add the social links on the top right corner of the website, I'll use a class and I'll give it a name social. Okay, so now we have a div to add the social links. Okay, so here now we can give the links for our social websites. So here you can give the link for your website or social media profile, and then you can add a image reference so that it will be shown as a image. So for that we'll use image src, and here we need to give the image link. So here image link will be images slash, suppose I want to use the social icon for Twitter, so here we have the name for that, social icons Twitter dot png. So this file we are going to use, okay, for showing the Twitter as a link. Okay, so this will show as a picture and this will be the link. Suppose you can give here twitter.com, okay, slash whatever your name, Sunil, or whatever your Twitter ID that you can give. Likewise you can give for the other social sites. Okay, just copy this link and paste here. You can give YouTube, and here for YouTube we have the picture name is social YouTube.png. okay, so for now let it be these two. You can add more if you want. Okay, so now we have this link. For image we can give the height and width as well, and style also. So here we want to restrict the image size to 21 pixel. Okay, so next thing is we want to add the navigation. So for navigation I'll create one more div, and this div I'll use a class that I'll define later in our CSS file. I'll give it a name navigation. Okay, and we want to align our navigation to the center. Okay, so next thing is inside this navigation div I'll create one more div, and this div I'll use a class called, and I'll give it a name navbar. Okay, or nav. Okay, and inside this, this should not be a div, it should be list. Okay, so create a list here, and inside this list we'll create a li tag, and for li we'll use all the navigations which we want to give. So here what I do, I'll create a href, and here you can give the link, and here you can give the name of your link or navigation. Suppose I'll give home. Okay, same way, sorry, can copy and paste and give like about us, contact us. Okay, so this way we can give the link. Okay, so next thing is, now we have the social link and we have the navigation bar. We want to add our logo to our website, so let's add. So for logo we'll use the header. Okay, for header we'll close this. Okay, and here we'll use the href, and here you can give the link for your logo. If you want to attach it to something like to your home page or something, you can give the link here, and then we'll use the image. So we'll use the image for our logo, so we can attach here the logo image. So for that, the logo image will be images / logo.jpg. Okay, fine. So let's run our let's try to run our application. Run on server and see how our users.jsp is looking. Okay, so see the server is starting. It should show the users.jsp. See here. So now this is how our page is looking. This is the logo, this is the social icon, and this is the navigation which we have given. So it is so unstructured, we have like it's so scattered. So for this only we need to write the CSS file so that it will be showing in an arranged way. So in the next lecture we'll write the CSS to arrange our website links. See you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back. This is Sunil. So I'm back with the update, and in this lecture we are going to write our CSS file. So we are going to organize this page. See here, it is not coming in a proper way, so we are going to arrange it in a proper way. So let's get started. To arrange a HTML page in a required or desired manner, we need to write the CSS. Okay, cascading style sheets. Okay, so .css file, we already added this link here. Okay, css/style.css. so whatever we write here, it will be reflected in the JSP page, and in that way when we run our application, we'll see that change in our page. So let's write the CSS. So first thing, we see what are the div classes we have written in our JSP file. So we have the first div class we have written is social. So we need to define this social in our style so that this social div will be displayed in a proper manner. So for that, let me write the div.social. So div.social will give us the option to arrange the div social. Okay, so for this, what I write, I'll write few things like margin hyphen left. So I want to align it towards left. from left 90%. Okay, so let's see what this change is reflecting or not. So let me run this and see here. Now our social icon is from here, it came to here, from this point, from this left end to 90% towards right. So that's what we have written here. Margin left 19%, 90% means it will be marginalized towards left, from left to right. Okay, and then the next thing is I'll give the font family. Okay, leave it, font family is not required as we are using the images there. So next thing I'll give border, and here I'll give 0 pixel solid, and here you can give a color code. So here I'm giving color code as 0F799E, anything you can give. Okay, so next thing is I'm going to give the margin from bottom. So margin from bottom I'm going to give 10% for now, and same way margin from top I'm going to give 0 or 0%. Okay, so let's see how it is coming. So okay, so it is coming like this. The next thing is, now we have the social icon we have arranged. Next thing is we need to arrange the navigation. So for navigation, what we have used, for navigation we have used nav class. Okay, so for that we need to write the navigation nav class here in CSS. So for CSS nav we can use dot nav, and inside that we can write our navigation. Okay, so here I'll give margin 0px, I'll give padding also 0. Okay, and then I'll give list style I'll give none. Okay, and then we give nav space list, and for list we'll give float for right. So I want the list to be floated towards right. Then give width as I'll give 160 pixel. We'll see how it is coming, then we can change it. Okay, the next thing is I'll give margin hyphen top, and margin top I'll give 0 pixel, and then I'll give position I'll give relative. Okay, so now we have given the margin for navigation and nav list we have given. So let's run and see how it is coming. So see here, now it is coming like this. Okay, contact us, about us, home. Okay, so next thing is, now it is coming in a bit arranged way. The next thing is we need to add one more thing, dot nav a for anchor tag. Okay, and here we have to write the background. So background color we can give. So here I'll give something 2E 4F something you can give, whatever color you want you can give here. And then the next thing we need to give the color of the text. So here I'll give okay, and then we can give a display style. I'll give it a block style. Okay, next thing is we need to give the padding. I'll give 7px comma 28px. Okay, next thing we'll give text decoration. So text decoration I'll give none for now. should be decoration. Okay, the next thing is I'll give border top, I'll give 4 pixel, and style I'll give solid, and color I'll give red. So let's see how it is coming. I'll explain. First let us see how it is coming. See here, now it is coming like this. Okay, so now we have a border list here. Okay, so now when we are hovering here, we need to change the color of the link. So that we are going to do with the simple CSS change that we can do through dot nav list space e colon hover. So when we hover over the link, it will change. So for that I'll give the color and I'll ask it to change for white. So let's refresh and see here, now it is changing to white. Let me show it to some bright color that we can easily see. Put it green and refresh it and see when I'm hovering, it is changing to green. Okay, so now we have this thing, but one problem is there. There is a too much space here. So for that, how we can change that? Let me see what I have done wrong. So I have given here the display wrongly, that's why it was coming. Let me show you what was the error. So let me refresh it. So this here, it is not coming properly. There is a gap in between. So this is coming because I have given the display spelling wrong. So it should be only 1p display. And now if I refresh it, it will come properly. See here. Okay. So now we need to see why this space is coming. So let me investigate that. See here, this space is coming because we have written here wrongly. It should be button. Okay, and now if I refresh, it will come correctly. So see here, now it is coming correctly. Okay, so now we have arranged this navigation and social thing. Next thing is we need to change the background color of this page. So for that we need to, let me write on the top, it should be body. So we are going to change the color of the page, and here we can give the background hyphen color RGBA, and here we can give the RGBA coordinates. So I'll give suppose 178, 255, 188, 0.6786. Okay, and let me refresh this. So see here, now it is coming this way. So now we have a better web page to see. So we keep on adding the CSS when we add a form here. So for that part of CSS we'll see when we add. Okay, when we add the HTML, we'll modify the CSS as well. For now, this web page is looking good. Okay, see you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back. This is Sunil. So in this lecture we are going to write our first Java class for this project. So now we are switching from front end to back end programming, like we are going to write the Java program. So the very first program I want to write is I want to write a listener. Since we are going to use Java servlet in this project, I'm going to write a listener. I'm going to write a Mongo listener class. So I'll give class name as a MongoDB listener.java. So to create, I'll tell you more about what is listener and how we can use that. And why we are using that? First, let me create a class. So we'll click on class, and package name will give class dot each your success dot mongodb dot listener. Okay, so this will be the package, and inside this package we'll be creating a class mongodb listener. Okay, click on finish. So now we have this class mongodb listener. Okay, so this class we have created. Now I want this class to act as a listener class in this project. So let me tell you first thing, what is listener? Listener is part of Java Servlet, and it is basically a predefined interfaces that are available for developers in the application lifecycle to achieve some task. So basically it's a predefined interfaces, and it is readily available for the developers to use and to achieve some task, some predefined task or some task which you want to do before your application server is started, something like that. Okay, so what does this listener do? It saves a lot of time because you need not to go and do the same thing again and again. It's one you do and it will be available for throughout your application. Okay, so in that way it saves a lot of time, and it also makes the application more maintainable because it reduces the complexity of your application, because the task which you are going to use at many times you are going to do only at once by writing a listener class. So it reduces the complexity, and it in that way it is more maintainable. Okay, so actually listeners in Java Servlet are basically two types. The first one is Servlet Context Listener, and the other one is HTTP Session Listener. So there are basic difference between these two. We are not going to in deep detail about these two things. We are going to just have an overview that is enough for this project. Okay, so Servlet Context Listener will be executed only once your web application is deployed in your web app server. So it will be executed only once. Okay, it will be executed once your application is deployed onto your application server. And why we need and why I'm going to use in this project, I'll tell you. If you have a requirements that need to be executed before the application is started, then Servlet Context Listener is the best place for you. Okay, so we are, as I told earlier, listeners are two types: Servlet Context Listener and HTTP Session Listener. But I'm going to use Servlet Context Listener because it is good for our project. Okay, why? Because we need a listener before the application is started. So we want to connect to MongoDB, and for that we need to execute some task before the application server is started. Okay, for that reason I'm going to use the Servlet Context Listener. Okay, so it will be executed before the application is started. Okay, so when we run our application, the very first thing it will do, it will run the listener and it will execute the task which we will be defining inside this listener class. Okay, so understood? And HTTP session listeners will be available for only the session. So once you create a session, it will be available for that particular session only. But when you use Servlet Context Listener, it will be available for the whole context of the application. And because of that only, we are going to use the Servlet Context Listener. So to make this listener, we need to do one thing. It must implement the Servlet Context Listener. So for that, we'll write the Servlet context listener. Okay, so now we are implementing servlet context listener, so it will ask us to import. Okay, so import the servlet context listener javax dot. Okay, and now it will ask us to add the unimplemented method, so do that. Okay, so now we have two methods in this servlet context listener, that is context destroyed and context initialized. Okay, and it will take some parameters. So in the next lecture we are going to write this MongoDB listener that is implementing the servlet context listener. Okay, and here we are going to use at web listener. Okay, and it will ask us to import annotation. Okay, so we are going to use annotation. So now this will make this as a web listener. Okay, so see you in the next lecture where we will be writing these two methods. Okay, see you in the next lecture. So let's start writing these two methods, context initialized and context destroyed. So first thing, I'll change this arg0 to SCE. It is servlet context event. Okay, so let's rename this to something useful and something that we can easily identify that it is the object of the context event. Okay, so now why I'm going to use this servlet context event or servlet context listener or web listener, because we have defined this thing in web.xml. What is that? That is Mongo host and Mongo port. Okay, these two we need to connect to the MongoDB server. So for that, what I do when I initialize my server or when I start my server, first thing I want to do, I want to take these two Mongo host and Mongo port, local host and Mongo port. Okay, this Mongo host and Mongo port variables, and I want to set it to the attribute, set it to the context attribute. For that only we are using this listener. Okay, so that we can use these attributes whenever we need to connect to the MongoDB. Okay, so first thing what I do, I'll write the context initialized method. Okay, so for this I'll create an object for servlet context. Okay, and I'll give the name ctx. Okay, and with the help of this C object I'll get the context. So I'll use get servlet context. Okay, so here we need to import javax.servlet, so it will get imported here. Okay, so next thing is we need Mongo client. We need to call the Mongo client and assign these two variables, Mongo host and Mongo port, to Mongo client. Okay, so for that I'll use Mongo client. Mongo client is a client that we use to connect to the MongoDB. Okay, I'll create an object for this. I'll call it Mongo, new Mongo client. Okay, now it will ask us to import Mongo client. Okay, so we'll import com.mongodb.mongo client. Okay, so it is imported here. Now this Mongo client will take two parameters. The first one will pass the Mongo host that we take from the context, and the other one is Mongo port. Okay, so for this I'll use the context object, servlet context object, to get the initialize parameter that we have initialized inside the web.xml. Okay, and here we'll give the name for that. So what was the name? It was we have given Mongo underscore host. For local host, we have given the variable name as parameter name as Mongo host. Okay, next thing is we need to pass the Mongo port on the port on which MongoDB server will be running. Okay, so we'll use ctx.get init parameter, and here we'll give the name of the Mongo underscore port that we have given inside this web.xml. Let me show you one more time. Mongo port and Mongo host. Okay, this we are getting the value through context. Okay, now we are getting an error. Let's see what is this error. So it is saying the string undefined, because this is the string but this Mongo port is integer. So for that we need to parse this to integer. So for that we'll use integer dot parseInt. Okay, and we'll pass this to, let me full screen this. Okay, we'll close this. So now the error has gone. So now we have this Mongo object will be having two values, Mongo host and Mongo port, that we can use whenever we need during our programming. Okay, next thing is we got the attribute from the web.xml. Next thing is we need to set it to the context. For that what we do, we'll take the servlet context event object, and with that we will use the get servlet context, and with this, so first with this object we'll get the get servlet context method, and with this we'll use set attribute. So we'll use this set attribute. Okay, and here we'll give the name for the attribute. So here I'll give it a name Mongo underscore client. Okay, and here we'll pass this Mongo object. Okay, so Mongo, sorry. Okay, so now we have written this context initialize, where we are getting the parameters Mongo host and Mongo port and setting it to the Mongo client, and then we are setting it to the servlet context by using set attribute method, and here we are passing this object Mongo to the Mongo client. Okay, so next thing is we need to, when we initialize our server or when we start our server or start our application, this will get initialized and it will be set, the value will be set to the servlet context, and when we close our application, then the server will automatically detect that our application is getting closed, so it will destroy the context. So it will destroy the values or parameter that we have set to the context attribute. Okay, so for that reason we need to write the context destroyed. So for this what we do, we'll take the Mongo client again. Okay, and we'll create a Mongo, and then with this servlet context event, what we do, we'll get the get servlet context dot get attribute, and we'll pass the attribute name, that is here Mongo client. Okay, so here we have error. Let us, it is saying that we need to cast to the Mongo client. Okay, so that's a simple thing, the casting issue, and then we'll use this object Mongo to close the connection. Okay, so Mongo dot close we'll use, and in this way we can close the MongoDB connection and destroy this attribute that we have set it to the servlet context. So this is pretty simple. Okay, So now we have the attribute Mongo host and Mongo port ready to be used, and in the next lecture onwards we'll try to write our main logic to connect to the MongoDB and start writing the logic for user management system, where we'll create user, will edit user details, and then we'll delete the user details through Java, and backend will be the MongoDB. So see you in the next lecture. So we have written the MongoDB listener.java class, which is a listener class. Okay, so let me correct one mistake which I did here, otherwise we will get error when we run this. Here the name of the parameter is Mongo port. I have written MongoG port, it should be Mongo port. Okay, so now we have this Mongo listener ready. Next thing, we need to write a form where we can enter the data that we want to insert into MongoDB. Okay, so here in the users.jsp I will create a form, simple form in JSP, and then we will add the JSTL and Java codes later. Okay, first thing we will create a simple form. So for that we need to use the HTML form. Okay, and here we need to define the action. Okay, so action we will add later. Okay, for now let it be blank, and for every action we need to define the method. So here I'll be using method as post method. Okay, so this is the simple form, and here next thing is we need to define the number of fields, like fields, what are the fields we want in the form. The first thing I want a name, so I'll give that name, and then we'll define the input type. So it should be input type equal to, it is text. Okay, and name equal to, should be name. Okay, and we'll close this, use a br tag to break the line. Next thing is we'll use the email ID field, and here input type will be again text, and name will be email. Okay, so this name we will use while we write our Java code to take the value from the JSP page. Okay, and again we'll use the br tag to break the line, and then the next is I'll use only 3 fields: name, email, and password. Okay, so if you want you can add more fields, but to make the things not too complicated I'll use only 3 fields, and type will be password. Okay, and name will be password. Okay, close and break. Next is, now we have these 3 fields. Next thing is we need to add a button or a action that we can click so that it will call the post method. So for that I'll use input type, I'll use submit. So on the submit action it will call the post method, and value I'll give as a, since we are adding user, so value I'll give add user. Okay, so this will be displaying on this button. Okay, so now we are ready with the form. So okay, so let me run this to see how it is looking. Run on server and click on finish to see the changes on the web page. So server is starting. Okay, so see here, this is the form which we have created: name, email ID and password. So when you can add name, you can add a email ID, and you can add a password. Okay, so email ID, you can add anything. Okay, and password, and when you click on add, it should go to the MongoDB. Okay, that logic will write. But this form is not looking good. For this, what we need to do, we need to write the CSS. So for that, I have already written the CSS, and that I'll explain. But basically I have written actually one div as container, and I have given the width, height, margin, font family, position, and I have written another div that is main. Okay, so these two basically I'm going to use, and then for the input type and password I have written this thing. Okay, so it's a simple thing. Okay, so let me use these two div to show our web page better. Okay, so for that, first thing what I do, I'll use a h2 tag and I'll align it to the center, and then I'll give the name for this form user management system. Okay, and then I'll create a div, and class I'll use as a container. Okay, so one div I've created, container, and I'll close after the form, and then I'll create one more div, and here I'll use the class main. Okay, and I'll align it to center. So let me write this, and I'll close this after the form. Okay, so now we have written this container and this main div. So let's see how it is looking. So I'll just refresh this page. See here, now it is looking much better. So what I have done, I have added this h2 tag, and I have added a div, this white one, and then I have added one more div so that it will be displaying like this. Okay, so let me show you this logic or CSS. See here, I have written the div container that is having a width of 760px, so that will be the this div, the white one, and then I have created one more div as main that is 620px. Okay, the inside one, and rest of the things are pretty simple. It is like float to left, margin, font family, background color, all those things. Okay, and then for register I have written some logic that you can go through, and it is pretty simple. I'm not going to spend much time explaining those simple things. So now we have this form ready. Now we can start adding the Java code too, so that we can start adding the field, these field values what user is entering to the MongoDB. So you must have seen we got some error here while we have ran our project. What is this? Let me show you. It is showing that exception in monitor thread while connecting to the local host. See here, this error we are getting because we have ran our project, and when we run our project it will run this class as well, listener, and it will look for the MongoDB which is running on the Mongo host, that is local host, and when it is not finding the anything running on the local host and this port 2701, it is throwing the error. So in the next lecture we will start the MongoDB server, and we will run this project again, and we'll start writing our model class. That will be the user.java class, and then we try to add the servlet for this action which we will perform while submitting this user detail. So see you in the next lecture where we'll be writing the model class. Okay, so now we have this form ready. Let's write the model class. So for that, I'll create a class. I'll go to the new, and then I'll go to the class, and here I'll change the package. I'll create a new package and I'll give it a name model. So inside the model package, I'm going to create a model class, that is user, and I'll click on finish. Okay, so now we have this model class user. So in this we are going to define these three fields: name, email and password. Okay, so along with the ID which will be generated by the MongoDB when we try to insert the data. So for that, we'll create a private fields, okay, private members, and here I'll give a type as string, and it will be ID, then other one will be private name, private string name, then the next one is private string email, and the next one is private string password. Okay, so these three fields, name, email and password, will get from the user entered value, and this ID will be generated by the MongoDB. Okay, so now we have defined these private members in this class user. Let's create a getter setter method so that we can get and set the values. So for that, you need to right click on this here, and you need to go to the source, and when you go to the source, you can see the here option generate getters and setters. Click on that. Okay, and select all the fields: email, ID, name and password. Okay, see here I have given wrongly, it should be email, I have given email. Okay, let me correct that. So it should be email. Okay, then go to source and generate getter setters and select. Okay, and then click on, from here you can deselect and select all as well. Okay, and click on OK. So see here, now we have the string get ID, set ID, get name, set name, get email and set email, and get password and set password. Okay, let me copy this to top. Okay, let me increase the font size. Go to window, preferences and text font, and click here edit, and here you can choose the size as 12. Okay, click on apply, click on OK. So now it is coming in a better way. Okay, so now we have written the model class. In the next lecture we are going to add the post method, and we are going to add the action here, and then we'll write the servlet for the corresponding action. So see you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back. This is Sunil, your instructor, and I hope you guys are having great time with this course and you are doing good. I hope you are learning from this course, and if you have any doubt, any question or any suggestion to improve this course, please do write inside the course question and answer area, and I will be happy to answer all your questions, and I would be very much happy to work on any suggestions to improve this course experience. So let's get started with this lecture. In this lecture I'm going to write a few JSTL code in our JSP file for this form. So when I clicking on the add user, it is not taking us to anywhere. So what usually we do when we enter some data here and click on add user, it should go to the database. For that I want to write some logic. So when I am using add user here, it should take these values which user has entered and it should forward these values to the some servlet where I can set these values through a model class object, and then from model class I can take it to the DAO class, and from DAO I can take that to the database. So this is the normal procedure. From here it should call a servlet. From the servlet I can set these values to the request scope and set the values to the some model class object, and then from there we can call a database access class, and then we can submit to the database. So for that, the first thing I want to add a URL here so that when I click it will take us to the servlet. Okay, for that switch to the JSP, and inside this here we have written the form action. So here only we need to give the URL variable. Okay, so for this I will use c:\out and I'll give the value, and the value will give inside the dollar braces, and I'll give the variable name add user URL. Okay, so this is the variable I'm setting here. So now I have this variable here. Next thing is okay, so now we have added this add user URL. So when I click on add user, it will take us to this variable. Now this variable I need to define inside the map to the servlet URL. Okay, for that we have c:\URL. With that we can map to a servlet. Okay, so for that I'll give a value, and value will be here. I'll give the URL add user, and variable will be this value which we have defined here. Okay, add user URL. Okay, so now when we click on add user, it will set the value to this add user URL, and this add user URL I'll map to a servlet URL, that is add user. This we are going to write inside the servlet. Okay, so now let me refresh this, or let me rebuild the project. Now see here, when I'm clicking on add user, it will take us to the URL, that is add user, right? So this add user, you can see here on the top, this is coming from this here. Okay, so now when we click on add user here, it will take these values to the servlet. So in the next lecture we will write the servlet for this add user URL. See you in the next lecture. So let's write the add user servlet. So to create a servlet, we need to go to our source package, source folder, and we need to, you can go with creating a class, or if you want a easy way, go to other and type here servlet, and here you can see the inside web, you can see a servlet. Select that, click on next, and here you need to give the Java package where you want to create your servlet class. Okay, so servlet is just actually a Java class only. Okay, so com.isyoursuccess.mongodb. I'll give it a name operations. Okay, or whatever name you want to give to your package you can give, and the class name I'll give add user. You can give add user servlet or something, but I'm giving add user.java, or it will be okay. And then click on finish. It will create a servlet. I'll tell you what will be the difference between when you create a Java class and when you create a servlet. Here, when you create a servlet, it will automatically add this web servlet annotation, add web servlets annotation, and it will add this URL, add user. Okay, and the next thing, it will automatically extend to the HTTP servlet. Okay, and then it will also give you the methods like do get and do post that we are going to use. Okay, so if you are new to servlet, I will give a brief introduction to servlet in the coming lectures. Okay, before we go ahead by writing more codes, I'll give you brief introduction about servlet, okay, and its life cycle. So don't worry about that. So here what I'm going to do, I'll change this URL to small a add user, because in the JSP page I have given a small a add user. Okay, so that would be fine. So now when I click on the add user on my UI, it should come to this servlet. So for that, to test, what I do, I'll give a simple, inside the do post method, I'll give a simple system.out.println to see whether we are calling this servlet or not. Okay, so I'll simply print a message inside add user servlet. Okay, so now from this JSP, when I click on this add user submit button, it will come to this add user URL, and then it will call this servlet. Okay, so let's run this project and see the flow. Run server, click on finish. It will start the server, and then it will build and run our project. So see here, now we are here. So now if I click on this add user, it should show us a message on our console. Okay, so click on add user and see here, it is showing us the message inside add user servlet. Sorry, I have given the wrongly inside, it is inside. Okay, so not a problem, that a spelling mistake. So we are seeing this message here on our console. That means we are rightly calling our servlet. So in the next lecture, we will continue with the servlet, and I'll also give a brief information and introduction about servlet. So see you in the next lecture. Hello and welcome back. So in the previous lecture, we have created a servlet, that is add user servlet, that is a HTTP servlet. So I told you that in this lecture I'll give you brief introduction to servlet so that it will be easy for you to understand and follow this course going forward. So let's have a basic understanding of servlet. So what is servlet? I'll tell you in a simplest way. Servlet is actually an interface in Java. Okay, so it's a interface that we need to implement if we want to create a servlet. So if we go by a definition, servlet is a small Java program that runs within the web server. So this is the definition given by the Oracle. So this is the basic definition of servlet. A servlet is a small Java program that runs within the web server. Okay, so I'll tell you, servlet is used to create web applications. So when we use JSP here, if we go and start writing everything inside this JSP, the Java code and all, it will become very vague. It won't look good, and at last JSP is going to convert into the servlet. So it is better to write a Java code. So that's why servlet is there. Okay, so servlet receives and responds to the request that it gets from the web clients. So when we added here, when we ran our program or application, when we are writing something like name, email ID and password here and clicking on add user, we are sending a request to the web server. So here this is the client, and when we are clicking on add user, we need to take this information from this client to the server. So that is client and server interaction that we are doing here. So we need to take this form information and submit it to the server, and from server it will go to the database. Okay, so servlet receives and responds to the request from web client, usually over the HTTP protocol, that is hypertext transfer protocol that we do over the internet. Okay, so to implement this interface, you can write a generic servlet. There are two types of servlet. One is generic servlet that extends javax.servlet.generic servlet. Okay, and there is another servlet that is HTTP servlet that we are going to use in this project. So see here, our servlet add user is using HTTP servlet, so it is extending the HTTP servlet. Okay, so and that is the case. Okay, and this interface defines methods to initialize a servlet, to service a request that we are getting from the client, and once the request is fulfilled by sending a response back to the client, it also contains the method to remove the servlet from the server. So it is basically when we create and initialize a servlet, it will load the servlet, then it will initialize the servlet, and then it will service that servlet requests, and then it will destroy the servlet. So this is the life cycle of a servlet, that is load, initialize, service and destroy. So once everything done, destroy the servlet from the web server. So this is the life cycle of a servlet. Okay, and I'll tell you one more thing, the client server request with this thing. This is the client, this is the server, and we are sending a request, and when the request is going to the server, response is getting generated at runtime, and this runtime response is being sent back to the client, and this is the client server interaction. Okay, so this is a little bit about the servlet. Okay, so we are going to use this do get and do post in our project. So there are many other methods that will see whether we can use in this project or not, but for now we are going to use do post and do get. So do post and do get methods we are going to use. Okay, so this will serve the request that is coming from the HTTP, that is of type post, and this will serve for the get. So I'll tell you what is do post and do get. See here, when we are submitting this value, so we are using for form action, we are using method as post, so we can use the post and get. Okay, there are two methods. So when you use post, it will be served by this do post method, and when you use get, it will be served by the do get. So now we have the fair information about servlet. We are going to write the real code for this project in the next lecture. So see you in the next lecture, and if you have any doubt, any question, any suggestion, any feedback, please do write inside the question and answer section of this course. See you in the next lecture.